The title that I've chosen for this week, Another Brick in the Wall. Who knows where this comes from?
Pink Floyd.
Yeah, Pink Floyd, right? So obviously this is a phrase that some of these folks over here I expected to really have at a ready recollection of this, and some of y'all knew it, I caught that. But some of y'all maybe to have been like, I have no idea. Now, just so you know, we're not going to go into what Pink Floyd meant as the group. Great philosophers though they are, they were taking a different path with the phrase than what I'm wanting to take with this. So let me ask you to play the Read Chris's mind game. What do I mean when I entitle this session Another Brick in the Wall? What am I getting at? Yes, Mr. Smith.
Do you mean like bringing other Christians to the faith?
Okay, like bringing other Christians to the faith. That's an excellent guess. It's wrong, but it's an excellent guess. Now, wait until Sunday morning, and that's going to have a lot more viability to it. But, yes. Okay, one small piece in God's big, massive plan. Again, very, very close to being right, but not. But also going to fit in very well come Sunday morning. Okay, another step with the walk with God. All right. Still, no, there's no ESPN going on just yet. Josie, you want to take a crack at it? All right, the temple of God, built by saints, Christians, patriarchs, which goes right along with what Stephen said, and right there, I think, with what Isaac was saying, which is very close. That's going to come up on Sunday. It's not going to come up tonight. Jordan, save us. Another trial. Now, Jordan might be familiar with Pink Floyd because that's how Pink Floyd used it. All of the different psychiatric things trials that he went through. No, actually, we're going to be looking at the idea of a wall. How many of y'all can see the wall that's up there? Okay, so you see that there's a wall. How many of y'all noticed the wall when you walked in? How many of you looked at any of those individual bricks and actually were like, that's an interesting one. Let me look at that. Okay, put your hands down because you're not helping my point, okay? You're supposed to say no, of course not, because who does that, right? You know, work with my point here and not yours, right? That's the key. No, it's that idea that you have a big wall, and every wall is made up of these individual bricks, and every individual brick kind of gets lost when you compare it to the entire wall. Does that make sense? You know, if you're just another brick in the wall, you're just one like so many others in this wall, and that's the way oftentimes that people will look at you. They won't see you as an individual. What they will see is that you are a part of a greater picture, a larger picture, which is when they will place a label on you. We do this all the time, right? The idea, the concept of labeling people. We give people generic names or things such as that, kind of group them together so that we can, in our minds, kind of bunch people up together and say, I know what you're like because you are like this. And this weekend, that's what I'm wanting to really focus on, particularly tonight and tomorrow, looking at really a lot of the negative effects that come to play with the idea of labeling people. And at the very end, on Sunday morning, look at maybe some positive labels that are really important. Now, let's define things very quickly here. The noun definition for a label is a descriptive or identifying word or phrase, the verb form to describe or designate with a label, because you really want to use the word in the definition, right? So you designate someone with a label. And here's the reality is our entire society is built on labeling people. We're going to talk more about this tomorrow and why it is that our brains do this. But how many of y'all would consider me an old guy? Is that old guy sitting up there? Yeah, I'm looking. I'm taking names right now, okay? Some of y'all look to me and you're like, no, I'm not falling for that one. Smart. Very, very smart right there. How many of y'all have been called smart before? Some of y'all just now, right? Maybe some of y'all have been called dumb before. You know, that's always a possibility. What does it mean when someone lists you, they talk about you as maybe the smartest one in the class? All right? Y'all, you've had that designation given maybe, or maybe the class clown. Some of y'all may have been given that designation before. What are some other labels that people might use to talk about other people? And I want to make sure, it may go with us, let's make sure we keep, these are clean and appropriate. So just wanting to make sure beforehand, but yeah. Weirdo, okay, is a label that gets thrown out. Stalker, okay. All right, I'm not going to go there. All right. Okay, nerd/geek. We prefer geek over nerd. I'm just saying, that is the preference, but okay. Those are two separate, right? Those don't go hand in hand. Okay, the jock, or then you have bully. There's a hand. Yeah. Short. Okay, thrown in that short pile. Yeah, Ronnie. Okay, being called dumb. Ding dong. I heard dumb. Okay, yeah. Same kind of bad. Well, let me move on with this. There might be some labels that you have heard before that are actually kind of damaging to having just conversations with people. Here's some examples. How many of you guys have heard Generation X or Generation Y or Generation Z? I don't know what they're going to do after y'all's generation. Are they going to go to AA, or what the next one's going to be? What is that? Generation X, Generation Y, Generation Z, maybe millennial, baby boomers? You guys have heard those terms, right? What is that? Okay, boomer. Yeah. I don't, but I don't do that, boomer. But, yeah. Yeah, well, actually, that's going to be thrown out quite a bit this weekend, is that phrase. Okay, boomer. That's a big one. That's a huge label that is used in a derogatory way towards those who are older. But yeah, what does this do? Like boomer, or that's a millennial. That's a Gen X guy. That's a snowflake. What are you doing when you say those things? Okay, classifying them, yes. But you're classifying them in a group that, they're like, I was going to say something until you asked the question, yeah. In a group that if you put them in this classification, you can now do what with them? Make fun of them? Or even put them down? Okay, bully them, yeah. Yeah, you treat them all the same. Okay, all right. Yeah, we're going to get there, that's not an attitude or a path that Christians, it's not a tool at a Christian's tool belt. And we're definitely going to see that. But once you name someone, and you put them over here, you give them this label, and you're like, now you are just like every other one who is like this, right? And I don't have to know you. I don't have to know what you're like. I don't have to talk to you. I don't have to have a relationship with you. None of that matters because I already know everything I need to know about you, and that is that you're part of Generation X. You're part of the baby boomer generation. You're a millennial. You're a snowflake. You're a this. You're a that. You're a whatever. And at that point, you're allowed to say, I'm just going to dismiss you. What you say doesn't matter because I already know everything I need to know about you, and I don't like it. Does that make sense? What happens when you throw a label on someone, you shove them off to the side, and you say, I know everything I need to know about you. Whether it be boomer or snowflake, rich or poor, athlete, geek, nerd. I separated those because, again, we prefer geek over nerd. I'm just saying. Republican or Democrat, conservative or liberal. There are Ducks fans and there are Beavers fans, and the world can separate down that line too, right? So, all of this to say, this is what we're talking about. Now, if you weren't bored yet, and some of y'all might already be there, it's fine, I get it. I'm going to bore you now. I apologize. I know you guys are like done with school for the weekend, but you're not. I got a grammar lesson here because I think this is really important for us to understand. How many of y'all know what an adjective is? All right. Yeah, Maggie, do you know what an adjective is? Are you able to, can you tell us? Or what's that? Yeah, it describes the noun, right? Good job, Maggie. That's exactly right. You have you have a word that describes a noun. And let me give, for instance, and some of y'all have heard this before, so take it for what it is, because I've gone through this before. But if I were to say, hey, the kids are outside, not right now, obviously, but the kids are outside playing kickball, and Ben just kicked the ball. How many of you guys can picture that? Now, if I said the kids are outside and they're playing with a pink and purple polka dot kickball and Ben just kicked the ball, did your picture change at all? Are you thinking something differently from what you were before? Yeah, because how many of y'all had a red ball in mind? How many of y'all were thinking purple because I used purple the last time I did this illustration? A couple of you, gotcha, yeah. Yeah, that's what adjectives do. Adjectives change the noun that they're modifying. And so it's important that we understand this facet. And so let me also suggest, we're almost done with the grammar portion of our lesson tonight, so I know, eyes are starting to glaze over, that's fine, but did you realize that sometimes you can turn an adjective into a noun? Like if you go to Luke chapter 7, we don't need to turn over there, but Luke chapter 7, verse 22, and I think this is where John's wondering, hey, are you the guy? And he goes, go and report what you've seen. The blind see, the lame are healed, the lepers are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, the poor are taken care of. Y'all familiar with that? Those are all nouns, right? Except some of them are adjectives, right? A blind man, a lame man, a deaf man, a dead man, a poor man. These are all adjectives that get turned into nouns. And so all it is just missing the ones, the blind ones, the deaf ones. Does that make sense? You just cut the word out and then it becomes a noun. Everybody follow that? It's important that we see that because a lot of times the labels that we use are simply adjectives that we've turned into nouns, which means that Is it okay if I say the word adjectival? Is that going to cause anybody to just kind of eyes go back in the back of your head? Is that okay? Adjectival? All right, so the adjectival nouns, the nouns, that are from adjectives, what does an adjective do again? It changes the noun into whatever this is. So if you use a label that was an adjective and it's a noun, and I start looking and I say, you know what? Kevin, he's just a generation, millennial? Yeah, he's just a millennial. What have I done? I have changed the way that I perceive him based on the label that I've given to him. Does that make sense? I've used an adjective that's a noun, but I've used this adjective in order to change who he is in my mind. And that way he becomes what I want him to become. All right. Grammar portion's over. Are you guys, so you can wake back up now at this point. Did everybody follow, though, the importance of that? That using labels, when you attach a label to somebody, you are actually changing who and what they are in your mind. So, let's say that I were to pick on somebody, I don't know, how about Stephen here? He's ripe for the picking, right? Now, how many of y'all know Stephen here? A few of you? Somewhat, maybe a little bit. Now, what if I were to tell you that Stephen is a straight A student? Does that change the way that you think of Stephen? What? Stephen's like, don't tell, man. Yes, I get straight A's, but I've got a reputation I'm trying to uphold here, right? Is that what this is? Yeah. You might have a certain view, and I pick on Stephen only because I know he can take it, and also because I don't think he's a straight A student. No, I'm kidding. That was a joke. That was a joke at Stephen's expense. Sorry. But no, when you look at him, maybe, just maybe, if his teacher were to come up and be like, if you're sitting around him, be like, Stephen, you are the best student that I have ever had come through my classroom, would your vision of Stephen change a little bit coming from an actual authority? It probably would, wouldn't it? It should. Let me just say that. So, usually do people, though, use labels to talk about the good things about other people? When people decide to label someone, is it usually with the really great and positive things? No, not usually. Usually the case is we instinctively go to the bad things, the juicy gossip, knowing things about a person that person doesn't want us to know. And so now we can put labels on people, such as, what would you bring up earlier, Stephen? No. Okay. Okay, boomer. Right? Okay, boomer. Why do you say okay, boomer? Not you, because Stephen made it very clear. He doesn't actually say some. Why do some people say okay, boomer? All right. And maybe there may be some who are not familiar with this phrase. That maybe you haven't heard this phrase before. So I will explain very quickly. But a lot of times, those in the younger generations, anytime that someone from the older generation were to say something to them that demonstrates in some way, shape, or form that they don't relate to them, they'll say something that comes from a time past, a different way, a different thing, I don't know. Back in their day, traveled. I don't know what you're complaining about. We used to go, 10 miles to school, walking and barefoot, uphill both ways, and 3 foot of snow, right? And like, okay, boomer. It's just a matter of dismissing what they're trying to say. So that's what that phrase is. What about snowflake? Anybody ever heard the term snowflake before? Yeah? Yeah. Would you want to tell us what it is? Okay. All right. Yeah, snowflake. It's a demonstration, or you say that to someone who is weak or fragile, that their psyche can't handle it. It goes along with the participation trophy generation. That's the old folks to the younger folks, in the way that they would say, y'all don't even know what hard work is. You're a bunch of fragile snowflakes. Anything that happens to you and you dissolve right there on the spot. Nobody knows what it's like to actually work for anything anymore because everyone got participation trophies all the time, right? That's labeling. It goes both ways. And I think it's important that we understand that. Let me make sure I'm not skipping here. So, once you attach a label to someone, it becomes easier to treat them as you would treat the label, not the person. You kind of take their face away at that point, and you put them into a wall with all of the other bricks that are just like them. And now you deal with this faceless wall, and you dehumanize it. Does that make sense? That's what labeling basically is doing. Do you realize Jesus actually kind of talks about this very type of an idea? If you go to the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew chapter 5, and I'm going to just really focus only on verses 21, 22. He says, "You've heard that it said, the ancients were told, you shall not commit murder. Whoever commits murder shall be liable to the court. But I say to you, everyone who is angry with his brother shall be guilty before the court, and whoever says to his brother, you good for nothing, shall be guilty before the Supreme Court. Whoever says, you fool, shall be guilty enough to go into the fiery hell." I want to focus on these terms, you good for nothing, or you fool. These terms, and I'm going to condense quite a bit of information here into just a few sentences. If you wanted to know more about this, we can have a discussion later. But these terms actually literally are you empty head and you empty heart. And so if you're calling someone empty of head and you're calling someone empty of heart, what are you basically saying about them? They're not human. That they are devoid of any sense, and they are devoid of any compassion, of anything that makes us what we are as humans. You're basically saying to this person, you're not even worth me caring about. If you weren't alive, it would have no effect on me at all. Does that make sense, what he's getting at? When he talks about saying these things, he's not referring to you driving down the road and somebody cuts you off and you slam on your horn and you go, you empty head, right? You guys use that one all the time, right? You call people empty head? No? Okay, well, that's not what he's talking about. This isn't a momentary outburst. That's not what's under discussion. This is somebody who looks at somebody and very much they say, you are not worth my time. You're not worth anything. I'm going to devalue you as a person. This is actually, by the way, this is the very first step to what is Jesus talking about? Do not what? Do not murder. This is the first step to murdering someone. I'm not giving a how-to. I'm just saying that when it comes right down to it, you can't get to the point of murder unless you have first taken the humanity away from that person. You have to find a reason, find a way to devalue their humanity. It's hard to say these things and not think of an issue that's been really important for years, for actually a very, very long time. Earlier this year, the Supreme Court decided it was not within the Constitution to mandate abortion on the federal level, determined it was going to let the states handle this. And I'm not wanting to get into the political aspect of all of this. What I do want to say, though, is this seems to be a clear example of exactly what Jesus is talking about. Now, first and foremost, I do want to say talking about things like abortion is not easy. And it is, I think, unfair to assume that the discussion is just a very simple black and white issue. There are very few things that are just a simple black and white issue. And I think it's a very naive way to go through life to just assume that everything is just black and white and there are no discussion points. But it is very important for us, in particular, to speak up for the lives of those who do not get the opportunity to speak for themselves. And I think it's incumbent upon us to do that. Now, there are all kinds of complications and various discussions that come up. Pregnancies, not desired, not planned, dangers, all kinds of things. But that's also kind of part of living in a sinful world. In a perfect world, children would be the gifts that bless a union that's been joined together in the presence of God, and the end result is that God is glorified, right? That's the perfect picture of bringing children into the world. Unfortunately, we don't live in that perfect world. That's not always the reality. We're in a fallen world where things don't always go as intended. And the easiest way to make the choice to have an abortion is to think of the child in these terms. It has no heart. It has no head. It has no humanity. It's not a child. This is a piece of the woman. It's easy to simply take it and label it and dismiss it, right? Can you see how this is the step that needs to be taken? Slap a label on it, say this isn't a child, this is a fetus. And at that point, you're able to do what would be unimaginable to do to an actual little child. Is everybody following what I'm saying here? That's the issue that's at play. When we can convince of ourselves, when we can take humanity away, it becomes easier. It's been estimated there have been over 1 billion abortions that have taken place worldwide. 1 billion humans who were tragically killed before they had a chance to demonstrate to the world the ways in which they were made in the image of God. 1 billion times in which murders have been justified because it's easy to think of that child as empty-headed and empty-hearted. And that's just an example. I'm just giving you an example. There's many more we could come up with. The atrocities that were done by the Germans to the Jews in the middle 20th century. The atrocities that have been done in many nations, including ours, to the citizens of African tribes during the slave trade, or the indigenous populations of what was Eurocentrically called the New World. In all these instances, you have to first convince yourself that these aren't really human. They're subhuman in some way. They're empty of heart. They're empty of head. You have to be able to put a negative label on them. And then when you can lump them all together in this negative label, then you can treat them as a whole in a certain way. The scribes and the Pharisees, what was their position on murder? This one's an easy one. Don't do it. Yes, thank you. All right. Their position on murder was, don't do it. Don't pick up that knife. I was going to say gun, but that wouldn't have meant anything to them. Don't pick up that knife. Don't do it. But what about hating your brother? That's okay, as long as you never actually act out on it. And Jesus is like, no. We're going to the root. We're going to the heart of this issue. Jesus says, looking at another person, calling them empty of head or empty of heart, disdaining them so much that you can't even consider them on your level and worth your attention, which is, by the way, how they treated Gentiles, tax collectors, those kinds of people. He says, you've already committed murder. Right now, let me suggest the dismissal of other people is happening rampantly. How many of you all knew that elections were coming up fairly soon? Let's get those ballots in, right? It's coming up. Elections are coming soon. Perhaps you've heard some of these terms, the things that we've been talking about from flyers, maybe from teachers or parents, maybe people from the church. Maybe you've heard phrases something like, it's those liberals who are ruining our nation or our state. Let's blame it on those liberals. It's those conservatives who don't care about anything but putting money in their pockets. It's those climate change wackos who don't have any real science behind them. It's all just a hoax. We need to stop those fascists, those right-wing neo-Nazis, those Republicans, those Democrats, those terrorists, those rioters, those illegals. Phrases such as toxic masculinity, talking about gays or queers, or blacks and whites, when used in certain ways, those are labels. All of those things are the ways that people label other people, ideas, thoughts, various things, and then you slap a label, and then you can treat the person or the idea in a certain way. How many of y'all have used the label boomer? Okay. All right. What about snowflake? Anybody use the word? Okay, y'all are disqualified. Y'all are snowflakes, okay? So you're not, no. All right. Millennial, Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z, doing so in order to criticize people. It comes from all sides. And I want to make sure I am directing everything that I'm saying right here at y'all. You get that, right? I mean, I am coming in hard on this, but I want y'all to realize I'm directing everything right at y'all too, because this comes from everywhere. Both sides of every aisle use labels in various ways. And it's important that we understand that. Usually labels are accompanied by sarcasm and schadenfreude. Is that a term that y'all are familiar with? Some of you. The definition, I put the definition in quotations there. It's taking pleasure at someone else's misfortunes. That you're like, good, I'm glad that happened to them. They deserved it because of X, Y, or Z. Something bad happens to them and you rejoice. So this is what is taking place, folks. And this is, I think Stephen got to this earlier, and I said we'll talk about it later. Labeling in a negative way in order to dehumanize somebody is not a tool that a Christian should have in his toolbox. Sarcasm, the schadenfreude that goes with it, all of that, we should not be the people that are doing this. But oftentimes, we're not that much different from the world. Because I don't think we really see this for as big of a problem as it really is. Now, this I think is what Jesus is referring to in Matthew chapter 7. And I want to say this before we leave Matthew chapter 7 and close up for this evening. And I think it's very important because all of us here, and to some degree y'all more over here, to some degree some of y'all though, have been wronged by somebody in some point in some way. Is that fair to say? At some point somebody has done something atrocious to you. At which point they have been labeled in a certain way, and they have been, we're going to talk about boxes tomorrow, they've been tossed into that box of people that I never want to have anything to deal with ever again. That box of people that don't deserve grace, they don't deserve happiness. I want to see them fry. I want to see all kinds of bad things happen to them. I'm glad when it happens. They're in your box of people that you just want to burn, metaphorically speaking, of course. I want to implore you right now, if you have those people in your life, and we get it. I mean, everybody's been wronged before, and I know. I mean, folks, a lot of folks here have been in high school before where y'all are. We know a lot of the pitfalls, being marginalized, ridiculed, feeling lonely, people doing things for whatever reason, and maybe you just really want to get this person out of your life completely. Maybe label them a bully, a jerk, some kind of label that you could dismiss them. You can move on with your life, accepting they really don't exist. Maybe it's some of you who've been hurt in incredible ways. Someone has done something to you. The name being mentioned just causes the hairs on the back of your neck to come up. I want you to think of that person right now. I've been spending enough time hoping that by now you've visualized this person, whoever it is. Hopefully, for some of y'all, that person doesn't exist yet. And I hope that is the case. But I want you to repeat after me when we talk about these people. I want you to say this with me. Think about that person and say, I forgive you. Let's say it, everybody. I forgive you. And I want you to mean that. Because quite frankly, it doesn't matter what this person has done. It might be an abusive father or an abusive spouse. The kid who humiliated you in junior high school has altered your life. A boss who left you feeling inadequate. A teacher who did atrocious things. Maybe even to a child, a mechanic who messed up your car. I don't know who it is. I don't know who it is, but these are the words that we need to extend. I forgive you. Now, you need to mean these words. You need to let this weight, that by the way, they don't feel it. Right? They have no idea the burden that you are carrying because of them. And it is eating away at you, gnawing at your soul and causing all kinds of problems, and they're just living their life. You need to get that weight off of you. Forgive them. Turn them over to God. Forgive them and say, as far as I'm concerned, I'm at peace. And by the power of God, you can. Now, we're going to talk about more of this tomorrow. And by the way, we're coming back. What time's on the flyers? At 9? All right. We're going to come back 9 o'clock, not here, right? Everybody heard that? Not here. 9 o'clock at Whitaker Middle School. Tomorrow at 9, and it's not just for the kids. In fact, we very specifically have things planned for adults as well. So, for you adults, we invite you to come back and join us at Whitaker tomorrow. We're going to have a couple more lectures, a couple group discussions, where we're going to break it down by age and some other things. So we're going to talk about this tomorrow, but for now, I want you to consider how important it is to offer forgiveness to someone, instead of just slapping a label on them and dismissing them. First of all, it's not how you want to be treated yourself, is it? And second of all, is that the way that God treated you? Both of these concepts we're going to discuss tomorrow, and I invite you to join us tomorrow morning. But for now, let's conclude this discussion with a prayer. And then following the prayer, am I handing this over to anybody? I'm going to hand this over to two people. Raise their hands, so they can have a knockdown drag out over who gets to be the one after this. So, all right. Well, I'm going to conclude this with a prayer, and then we'll turn it over to somebody. Let's pray together. Our great and merciful God, we ask now for your help. Help us to understand your mercy so that we can show it to others. Give us strength to follow Jesus' teachings concerning others, and give us your grace when we fall short. We love you knowing that you are here with us every step of the way. We thank you for Jesus, our King, who makes up for all of our deficiencies. And it is in his name we pray. Amen.